Hello, you're welcome to today's session of the discourse. Today, we are going to be dealing with a very special topic, common sense or nonsense. And my name is Wisdom Klachu, and I have with me David Osawapong to do justice to that topic. Man of God, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today.
All right.
And I want to say something. I'm not here to do justice to the topic alone. We are both here to.
Oh, that's why we are here. That's why we are here.
All right. So basically, with what you just said, we have had quite a number of videos coming to us from one particular person, and his name is Abraham, as we all know, and he's more or less the leader of the Common Sense family,
yes.
A movement that believes that common sense is the way to go. And so we would attempt to answer or give some few responses or explanations to some of the questions or that he has raised concerning our Christian faith. I think we'd also go ahead to answer some few questions that others have sent in for us to answer, and then eventually we'll be able to talk a little bit about common sense.
Yes. The reason we are doing this is because as men of God, we have people come to us all the time saying, do you know this guy? Listen to what he's saying. What's your response to it? And we have given responses to people in person from here and there, but we feel the need to attack this head on. Let the world see that there's not much to what he's saying. And not just that, we have some other things to talk about in general. There are some pertinent questions that people usually ask. What is this? If this is this, why is that so? And we are hoping that with this session, we can attack those things, give a comprehensive, a clearer picture of what this thing is. I always say that when someone comes to you, an atheist, someone who doesn't believe in God, and comes to you, asks you a question, just because you don't have an answer to that question, does not mean there's no answer. And also, it does not mean that what your beliefs are wrong. And so we are doing this in an attempt to start giving you answers, responses to some of the questions that come up on such issues, so that when you go somewhere one day, you would have a response to give.
So from where we get the term apologetics, you know? And so it's very important that today, everyone who is watching us gives us his ear, because I think that we do have a lot to say today.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to lay this emphasis. We are not here today to attack a person. All we intend to do is to give a defense to the gospel, to be able to give an explanation and an answer. And that's all we are going to do. So we'll take a few videos, which will be the first session of today's presentation, and then give a response to it. Yes.
So we have a video, and you're going to see this man talk about some issues. We want you to watch the video, and when you do watch the video, you know, actually the video is not in English, so I'll take some time and then translate for you what he's saying. Then we attack the issue. All right, let's watch the video.
Nyankopon te soro ho one bonsam nete ho ene yesi fight esi wo top ho Nyankopon so obi entumi bonsam kra oni hu kwan so start fight no esan se Nyankopon onim daache. God knows the future enti o san ka Nyankopon hu se bonsam abi boni or the confusion baba enti anya so obo no Nyankopon ehu ene wabo bonsam start confusion na ntokwesi wo soro ho a simple. I was saying, Nyankopon che bonsam no ku bonsam na etutwa Nyankopon ne bonsam ntokwa pupo Nyankopon ntumi ntokwa no e no che bonsam e na heaven ho gate ho no obi e gate no e no de bonsam ti hwe fom e no opia bonsam a yen nipa a yen ne boni bia no e no opia bonsam a odo Nyankopon na wentumi bonsam ne pia bonsam a ya no say hey asase munue na bonsam esane aba mo nchen na wo awuni mu a wo be makwan na bonsam abedaadaa na waye bone no me Nyankopon me wo ejabi ye fredi bonsam ja me de wo betum bigger quiz scenario we asekire ni maami jidini menim se bebia beduru no obu afu obaka sa branch em se bonsam na asoma no maami me bisa question maami woni wuku no mu wo mo dan amudem ena mo mma no adwoa kwabena eni Mustafa omo odan ya omudem enkrante eda dem ho ena wowo kobra epeja de ti so obeka ma me ne papa Papa yi sekan na wanku wo no. Ɛna papa ɛde sekan di pagya wo no. O pagya wo na na wakobie enkoda ne dan no window. Na watu wo ne gu nkoda no so. Na watu dan nim aka kye nkoda ne say adwoa mafia Yusuf matu wo bi egu mo so. Na wo a wonni mu a wo ne bekaw se de mesi ahwe wo dem ho no. Wo ya abofra wo dem ho a ka se ba ko kye ma me ne papa. Ba ka se da mesrew wa jimi kakra ho.
Abraham.
Na this Bible is an insult to the creator.
As you just watched, we have this man saying that, well, God was in heaven and he had the devil. He could not deal with the devil, and so he sent the devil down to us for us to deal with him. And he gives an example, a very interesting example. This example he says, there's a man and his wife in a house, and they have their children in the other room. And he finds a snake in the room with them. Instead of killing the snake, he picks the snake up and takes the snake to the children's room. So the children will be the ones to deal with the snake. And he goes on to tell the children that, look, I have just put a snake in your room. If the snake bites you, then you have an issue with me. He goes on to insult God, saying that this is unreasonable. And the man of God, David, has a very special response to this. And I want to go to him for it. Man of God, what do you have to say to this?
Well,
you did hear what I said concerning...
I did.
There's this guy, and this is what he's saying.
You know, I have a lot to say about this, but given that we have very limited time, I would want to just touch on a few things. So the first thing I want to touch on, actually, is the fact that this man begins his presentation by saying that if God was all-knowing, then he should have done this or that.
Exactly.
You know, there's this thing I always say, that no one is entitled to discredit God with a statement beginning with, if God was all-knowing, then. When someone actually makes such a statement, this is what he seeks to do. He actually seeks to claim that he knows what an all-knowing person should have done.
Okay.
Which is to say that he himself is all-knowing.
All right.
You know, Jesus used to do something very interesting when people came to him with questions. I always say that smart people do not answer loose questions. Smart people would usually pause and ask you more questions to be able to have that rigidity to your question, to make sure that the answer they are giving you is specific. You know, when you remember those days back in school, you could be asked questions as simple as, there's this piece of land. It took 2 men 1 hour to finish clearing the land. How long will it take 4 men? The understanding is that if it is 4 men, then it should be at least 30 minutes or at most 30 minutes because 2 men took 1 hour.
1 hour to do.
Now you see, these questions are only asked in basic school because the answers would not be the same, probably at PhD level.
Yes.
At PhD level, you're expecting whoever the candidate for PhD to actually conduct a research, which includes all the various factors of the scenario that is being given. Factors like how sharp is the cutlass that they have been given. Because if you give a blunt cutlass to 4 men, they will take longer than 2 men will take.
Yes, indeed.
You also have to consider things like, what was the climate? What's the strength of the men involved? There are many things involved. So then when you ask a wise person a question, he doesn't go ahead to answer. He questions your question.
Not even cut you. You know when we're doing physics in school?
Yes.
Before, when we were in JSS back then, in basic school, they asked the question, but when we go to SHS, we realized that our teachers put a lot of effort in telling us things like neglecting air resistance, because they realized that in order for you to fully consider, or in order for their question to be valid, they need to let you know that these factors you should neglect. Otherwise, the answer they're expecting from you would not be the answer that you could come out with, because other factors come into play.
Exactly. You see, when we're back in JHS and basic school, there was this very interesting thing we used to say. They say, what is air? Then we say, air is a mixture of gases. How loose a statement?
How loose a statement?
Because actually, water is made up of gases. So when you say air is a mixture of gases, it's the same thing you can say for water also. So when we start growing and maturing, we don't answer loose questions. We must make sure that every part is well defined. Every part of the question is well defined.
Before you get to it.
Before I even get to what I'm saying, I was telling you this, that no one can discredit God starting with a statement, if God was all-knowing then? Because the only one who can discredit God on that basis is someone who is all-knowing. Because someone who is all-knowing knows what an all-knowing person was supposed to have done. So the moment someone begins his arguments to attempt to discredit God with that statement, we don't even have to wait to hear what else he's going to say. Right from the beginning, as soon as he makes that statement, we hold him and ask him, Mr. Man, are you all-knowing? Because you seem to be speaking on behalf of the All-Knowing People's Association.
Exactly.
How do you know what an all-knowing person should have done? So then that statement already disqualifies the argument.
Yes.
When someone asks you a question, don't try to answer the question. When you are maturing, one of the first things you do, aside attempting to answer the question, is to answer the questioner. Because even if the question is the same, the answer may differ depending on who is asking.
One man said that we don't answer questions, we answer people.
Exactly. Because if your 18-year-old child comes to you and asks you, Daddy, can you tell me more about sex? There's something you would say. If your 5-year-old child comes to you and says, Daddy, can you tell me more about sex? There is something you would say. If your child who is 5 years old comes to you and says, Daddy, when you're coming back from work, can you get me an airplane? You say yes, go back and come back with a toy plane. If your child just graduated piloting school and comes and tells you, see, I need a plane, you wouldn't think he's talking about a toy. So the answer actually depends on who is asking.
Yeah.
So right from the start, the person making this statement is not qualified to begin with if God is all-knowing then. Then we move into the part where we are talking about having well-defined parameters. What he attempts to do with this example of the snake is to drag our minds into a virtual world that he has created himself, where he gets the opportunity to manage the conditions. He talks about a snake. Which snake? He said a cobra. He said this or that. Which child? Which father? You see, he's trying to lay the emphasis that once a father or a parent gives a snake to their child, then that father is either wicked, inconsiderate, or foolish.
Yeah, because that's what he said. He's saying that the father takes the snake to the children's room, and because of that, this our God we preach is a wicked God.
It's a wicked God.
So that means he's basing his entire emphasis on the fact that a snake has been given to the children. So, conclusion, this God is a wicked one.
There are many examples and statistics to actually back what I'm about to say now, where it is actually proven that dogs have caused more injuries to children than snakes have ever done.
90%.
Over 90%. Now, there's the thing. The question we need to be answering here is a father wicked for giving a snake to his child? Because it is possible for a father to be very loving by giving a snake to the child. There are some people who eat snakes. And so for some children, giving a snake to that child means you've given a meal for the day. There are some people who keep snakes as pets. And so for some people, giving a snake to the child happens to be a gift. You see, when you want to discredit God, the one who created everything in this world and beyond, you shouldn't attack it as if you are talking about the guy living next door or the woman who sells water at the roadside. You must make sure that every single part of this example you're giving is well defined. Because if it's not, then your argument may be flawed.
Man of God is serious. You see, we are dealing with an all-knowing God, and that's the premise of the question in the first place. You start by saying that if this God is all-knowing, now watch something. You went as far as going to deal with the all-knowing God. If you walked into a room with scientists, with the most intelligent people in the world, there are 5 of them, you walk into a room with them, you will be very careful not to make loose statements. You'll be careful not to just say anything anyhow, because they're not going to accept any loose talk. They're going to analyze what you say.
Well defined.
To be sure that what you are saying meets the requirements of logic. If you stand up and then you propagate the agenda of common sense, logic, reason, you need to be careful to your viewers and say things that resonate with logic. You can't give it an example and go and think that you have passed and come to a conclusion by saying that this God is wicked.
Man of God, I think we have a video where a child is seen playing with a snake.
We do. Yes, we do.
And
yes,
so
we do.
I think you should
let's see that video too. Yes, let's see this video where a child, a toddler, is playing with a snake.
Seeing a Burmese python coiled around their baby would be a nightmare for most parents. But for snake handler Jamie Garino, it's simply a show of affection from a beloved family pet.
Alyssa! That snake? Are you playing with a snake?
And the father of 3 from Michigan, USA, is on a mission to change opinion on what he...
Well, as you just watched, not every snake given to a child is actually for evil. We have more videos where you see children playing with snakes and their parents are there and everyone is happy. So not every snake given to a child is actually evil. All right, man of God, what would you like to say in conclusion to this point?
Well, basically, as we've said, I think that the most basic things that we can take from this first video or from this first point is that, see, no man is permitted to discredit God, starting with the statement, if God was all-knowing. Yeah. Also, when you attempt to discredit an all-knowing God, I think it's very important that whatever examples or logic you claim to speak should have well-defined parameters, because otherwise, all you're doing is trying to play a loose game. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, you really have no point at all. So I think that's conclusive for this one. I think we just have to move to the next.
I think there's one other thing that I have to say about this issue. You know, when you talk about the all-knowing God, and you want to question the reason he chose this decision, it means you have an alternative one. But this all-knowing God, in his mind, has tried your process, and he's seen that your process did not work. And so that is why he went with, that means an all-knowing God is justified in whatever decision he makes. And so you have no right. And actually, we are not saying that an all-knowing cannot be questioned. The issue is, if you want to, come with a better argument. Come with a better argument. All right. We have another video which would show you now. The most prevalent question we got is in this video. And so I'd like you to watch this video now. When you do, we'll come back and then we'll address that question as well.
Mark chapter 16, verse 15.
Mark 16, 15.
Can you babem? After a man for my pass.
Mark 16, 15.
Mark 16, 15.
Now, also say,
and Jesus can say,
Munko Yasina,
Magia to Munko Yasina,
Elka Sampacha Abodina,
Uncle Cancer Punch Abodina,
dear Ochidi,
dear Obedia, this is Christopher Cashier.
not Obonosono,
Now your boom was said, we never boys, the Benjamin Qua,
the Onginino,
I've been Moshe and a common sense family, a young Jindino,
Obebunifo,
Yandia Yabako, and some Jamajatum.
Essentially, one Obeji Dinichi.
Now, Mubeji Dino and Sanchani Webedimuchi, me Jesus Dimo,
Obetua money,
Mubetua Wombane,
Obeka Southfloor,
Mobeka Toss, Yerbasundia Brian Cantabro, Twaso,
Obama, I was so,
Mobama, Wawaso,
Nasa Onum Edwani Biara,
Nasamunum poison, as I said, Yami, Nasamunum poisoner, and Yamo, da, no. Common sense. Jesus.
In this video, you find that this gentleman is talking again once again about poison. He claims that this other man of God sitting with him should drink poison on the grounds that Jesus Christ has given us the power to drink in deadly thing and not be harmed. So he has poison there and he's telling this man of God to drink it. And it's ridiculous as you can see. You know, watching that video, you could easily be deceived to think that, oh yes, why not just drink it? But that's not the case. And let me allow the man of God, David, to say something about this.
Okay, so among all the videos we've responded to over the years, I think this video is the one that interests and intrigues me the most. Okay. Because it's very funny to me, actually. Now, this is the thing. Before I even attempt to go deeper, I'm just going to give an example that sort of is in line with the same logic he's trying to put across. And so he says, oh, this is a man of God sitting with me who believes that what the Bible has said about poison and the fact that if anyone drinks any deadly thing, it's not going to hurt them. So this is the poison. Drink it. If you drink it and nothing happens to you, then it proves that what is there is true. If you drink it and something happens to you, then it means that it's not true. So this is the kind of thing that comes to mind the first time we look at this. Okay. It looks like you catching a science student from Presec. Okay. SHS science student, probably the best science student in Presec. And you call him and say, you people, you have said, I've seen in one of your science books that rocket building is possible. That you can actually build something and then sit here, hold it and speak to someone who is millions of kilometers away from you. You guys call it mobile phone, right? And then this innocent science student says, of course, that's what science says. It is possible. Then Then he goes ahead and say, do you know what? Mr. Science student, design a phone right now and let me see. Then he says that because the science student says, oh, I can't do that right now, or I don't even know how to do it, or I can't, then it means that science is lying to have claimed to be able to design a phone. Now, this is the thing. When Jesus spoke, one of the things we have to clearly understand is that he didn't say that drinking deadly poison and not getting hurt is what proves that you're a believer. He said a believer can do this.
Okay.
Now, when we talk about the ability to do something, we are now going in to talk about potential.
Okay.
Now, men who do not understand potential will demand that you prove results right now. And when you're not able to do that, they say you don't have what you say you do. This brings my mind to something very interesting. I remember back when I was in JHS, especially, I had moved to a new school. When I got to the school, it was a very new environment. So the first time I didn't do too well. Then one guy in the school saw me and says, see, you know, this guy is a better student than you. I told him, on what basis?
On what basis? On what grounds?
On what grounds can you tell that this guy is a better student than me? He said, because this guy did better in the exam than you. And I told him, listen, the only statement you can make that both of us can agree as factual is that he did better but not that he's better. Because when you say he did better, we are no longer speaking about potential. We are speaking about something that has already come. Potential is what you have the ability to do, but haven't done yet. Potential is what you have the ability to do, but haven't done yet. And
it's like water, like in a dam,
yes,
where they mount water,
exactly,
hoping that it will turn to electricity very soon. But they mount the water, and tell, this water that they just mounted is about to turn to electricity, and you'll be like, okay. When they open that dam, you would understand.
You're an electrical engineer, and that is the best example from your field that you can give. And so that's what I'm talking about. And so with the exam example, the only thing that this student could have said was that he did better than you. On what basis can you say he's a better student? When you say he's a better student, you are assuming that you know what potential he holds and what potential I hold, which is not really visible to the eye. Okay. It's like seeing someone running with Usain Bolt after the time Usain Bolt was probably 10 years old and say this guy is a better athlete than you. You'll be making a very big mistake to say that because someone passed him. What is happening here is that the ability is in him and it would take some things to bring it out. The fact that at the very time that you placed a demand on the ability, it couldn't show up, does not mean it's not there. It does not exist.
Yes, it doesn't mean that.
It does not mean it's not there. It's like asking a child, this boy, can he raise a cement bag? You say, yes, he can. Because he actually has the potential to do so. You brought the cement bag, he couldn't raise it. This guy can never ever raise a cement bag.
Even let's make a very general statement, all right? Because it says, okay, Christians might not have the power that they say they do. What's something? If you say, someone comes and make the claim that human beings cannot raise a cement bag.
Yes.
And then he samples 10 people. And then he tells them, raise this bag. And all the 10 people that he samples cannot raise the bag. It still does not prove that human beings cannot raise this bag. It's just that these 10 men that he sampled could not raise the bag. The only way that he can prove that human beings cannot raise the bag is if he's got every single human being to try to raise that bag, and it did not happen.
And they all failed.
That means the moment he gets, look at this, the moment he gets one individual to raise that bag, it means that his entire premise is destroyed. It's destroyed. That means all he needs is one Christian to drink poison and not die.
And that's all.
And that's all.
And that's all. And that is why the argument is flawed from the beginning. Because this gentleman will never have the privilege to meet every single Christian to do so. Yeah. But putting that aside, there are many instances where it has been proven that men of the spirit have come into contact with very dangerous substances, viruses, chemicals, and nothing happened. And so if he really wants to go into this issue, all he has to do is check.
Oh, man of God, you see, what's interesting is this. I feel that people like this, they are cynics, not skeptics. The issue, they don't respond to reason. If you wanted proof of people who have tried drinking poison or have come in contact with deadly things and were not harmed, the proof is not to go and give poison to the Christian that you know. If you really were looking for answers, why don't you read? Why don't you watch videos of people who said, yes, I've got to that point in my Christian walk where I can drink poison and not be harmed. If you were looking for a point to convince you, that's what you should be looking out for. I keep asking, I keep wondering. After watching that video, I keep wondering, if that guy had drank the poison and not died, would he have been convinced?
You know,
I don't think so.
This is my issue with that. Anyone who attempts the kind of line that he attempted, you see, this is what they do. They say, okay, do you know what? If you're able to do this, I'll believe. As soon as you do this, they'll say, how about this one?
How about this one?
So you see, there are many people who claim to, they're just looking for that one last thing. This thing for me. But there's really no last thing.
There's no really last thing because they have determined. They don't respond to reason. They're not looking for proof. The proof is not going to show. And that denial of the fact doesn't prove it does not exist. It just means that no amount of evidence will convince you.
That's it.
And that's the problem. No amount of evidence will convince this guy or any other person on this issue. All we know is that they are always going to have one other miracle that they need for us to do in order to prove to them that what we say is true.
I guess that ends it for this issue.
I believe so. I believe so.
So I think...
Yes. Okay. So next, we'll be dealing with some questions that we received. And we have just one question to do. We'll take this question and we believe that our response to this question will go a long way to bless your life. The question you have from PY is this. If God knew that Adam would eat of the tree, why put the tree in the garden in the first place? Man of God, PY is asking that if God knew that Adam, the first man, will eat of the fruits anyways, God is all-knowing, right? And that's how they usually start. God is all-knowing, right? So if God knew that Adam, his first creation, is going to eat of the tree anyways, why put the tree there? All God could have done, is that's advising God. All this our all-knowing God could have done is take the tree out, problem solved.
All right.
So, how shallow is that?
So, you know, this question actually happens to be one of the most popular questions that come when it comes to the issue of God. And like you were saying, we are dealing with an all-knowing God. And so one of the things we have to consider is the fact that all the possible probabilities, he knows how all of them are going to end.
Yeah.
He knows every single move. If it was a chess game, he knows every single possible move. If it's going to be 1 billion different moves, he knows them all. And then after knowing how all of them will end, he comes back to see that, no, see, this one is the best move to take.
Yes.
Now, there are two people who ask this question. First of all, there are those who want to discredit.
Yes.
And there are those who just want to understand.
Yes, who really want to understand.
So I think that our answer would go for both people. Why did God put the fruit or the tree in the garden if he already knew that Adam will eat from it?
Manuel, I believe that our answer to this question actually cuts across a number of questions. And one of those questions happens to be, people ask the question that if there is God, why is there evil in the world? I think about the answer I'm going to give is going to respond to that. If God is so loving, why someone shot someone? Why did God allow this to happen? So basically, it's more like, why is God permitting things like this to happen? The response I'm about to give is going to cut across these things.
I believe so. I strongly believe. So this is the thing. All right. The first question we must ask ourselves when we ask this particular question is that, what do you propose the best option would have been? Because you say, if God knew that Adam would have eaten from the tree, why did he put it there? He shouldn't have put it there anyways. You see, what I always say is this, that do you know what you're asking for? There are many times there are things that we claim to be asking for, but we don't really know that what we're asking for, we don't know what it entails.
You don't know the consequences of what you're asking for.
The ripple effects of what you're asking for. Now, I just want anyone who is listening to us tonight, anyone anywhere across the world listening to us tonight, one of the things I want you to note carefully is this, that if God took that tree from the garden, the consequences.
Agree.
There would have been something that we cannot even imagine. Why do I say so? You see, God wanted to create a world where love will exist. For love to exist, it must be a decision by the one who is going to love. Imagine you had a wife in your house who was set on a timer. A robot that anytime you enter your house, the robot tells you, Wisdom, Pastor Wisdom, I love you. He knows that every 5 minutes he's supposed to say that. Will you feel loved? Love only exists when the one loving gets the chance to choose.
When it's a choice.
Worship only exists when the worshiper decided to worship. Taking that tree out of the garden means you have taken away choice.
Man of God, what I'm trying to say is that the tree was part of God's design. Because God planned to create a man who will love him, who will worship him.
Who could love him?
Who could worship him by choice. And so the tree was all part of the design.
Taking the tree away. You see, the thing is this. What people want to do is they want to eat their cake and have it. They don't understand that, see, when I take this thing, it's not an isolated situation. It runs through because it's a coding. It's a line of coding. It didn't just start from where you met it. It began from somewhere and it was going somewhere. So taking one out means taking it all out. So taking the tree out means that you have taken the free will option of humanity to choose. So when you say that God shouldn't have put the tree there, you are saying that God should have taken option out, free will out of humanity. Choice out of humanity. And if choice has been taken away from humanity, then what you are saying then is that God would have been creating robotic human beings. And that world would have been a world where love does not exist. Worship does not exist. And a lot of things that we treasure today. So God sat down and had the option. Take the tree away and have no worship. Take the tree away, have no love. Take the tree away, no decisions. Have the tree, man chooses what he wants to do. What will you do? So you see, at the end of the day, the issue is not limited to a tree.
It's not to a tree.
It's not limited to a tree. It's limited to options. There would have been no good or bad without that tree.
Yeah, because no one can choose. If you never get a chance to choose whether you want to do this or do that, then it's really not good or evil. The only thing you can do actually is the only option there is. That means it cannot be considered as good or evil.
So I really hope that PY, who sent this question, has had his question answered. And well, in our next episodes, we may be taking more questions. And so if you have any plans to send us questions, you can do so. You can even put it in wherever you're watching at. If it's YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching, you can just put it up there, and we might pick it up and answer in our next sessions.
In our last segment today, we're going to be discussing, is common sense enough? What we'll do now is this. The man of God and I are going to discuss if common sense is enough, and you get to decide if you agree with us or not. So, man of God, is common sense enough?
Is common sense enough?
We had a lot of issue of common sense. A lot of people are coming out to talk about the idea of common sense, what common sense can do for you, how enlightened you can become just by applying common sense. What we want to do right now is find out, is common sense really enough? What really is the grounds of common sense? And we leave it to them to decide whether common sense really is enough for you.
Okay. So, this part of the program excites me so much.
It excites me too, yes.
Because it's probably one of the main parts where the audience or whoever is watching us tonight gets the chance to decide.
Yes.
So we're just going to discuss it shortly. They get a chance to decide if common sense is enough. But I always say this thing, that common sense is not enough where expertise is required. I always say it, I'm going to take it again, that common sense is not enough where expertise is required. You see, the issue here is not that we are against common sense. The issue is that someone would seek to project the idea that common sense is overarching enough to be able to handle everything. It wouldn't be able to do that. You see, common sense has a lot of limitations.
It does.
A lot of limitations. And so I think to start with this segment, my statement will be this. Common sense is not enough where expertise is required. And I made this example some time ago when I said that. You see, to some people, it may take common sense to know that this guy has a headache. He probably needs to take paracetamol, all right? But then common sense does not operate, does not conduct a surgery on someone with a brain issue. So common sense, yes, may be for common things. But when expertise is required, common sense does not suffice. Common sense will never suffice where expertise is required.
It's required. That's brilliant. And I think that's a very good point you just made there. You made an example, and I thought it was interesting. When you made an example of, common sense can tell you that you have a headache. This is my view about this issue.
Yeah.
When you talk about common sense, what indeed is common sense? I ask this question, can common sense be taught? The common answer someone can give is that no, because it's common sense. It's knowledge that you really are not taught in the classroom. But take a moment and think about this. How did you arrive at that common sense in the first place? You just made an example and said that common sense can tell you that you have a headache. You have a headache. How did you come about finding out that human beings get headache? Is it because you got one? When your head was aching you, how did you know that it's called headache? This is the point I'm trying to make. Your body taught you that you can get pain in your head. That's what I'm trying to say. When it comes to the issue of common sense, there is this general information around us. So even though common sense is not taught in a classroom, you would realize that it is taught you anyways. You had to learn it at some point in your life. When we watched the last video we just watched, where this guy was presenting poison to the pastor to drink, he said drink, and he made a statement that common sense will tell you not to drink this poison. And see, that is the idea behind common sense. It's telling you not to do something. He said, don't do this because you are not supposed to do this thing. So common sense is basically what you are not supposed to do, or doing things you ought to do, and not doing what you are not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Common sense tells you not to drink poison because it's poison. A child could take poison and drink it. That means that knowledge is not common to him yet.
Exactly.
What we call common sense is common sense because it is common to many people, because many people are privy to that knowledge.
Yes.
So it's knowledge acquired, not necessarily taught in the classroom, but it's acquired some way. And I was giving this example. One time I sat in a car, and while we were going, this guy sitting by me was eating something in rubber, and then he threw it out. And I said, don't do that again. And he said to me, what should he have done? Look, there is bush all around. And I said, you see, and what amazed me the most was that I didn't control because I had about 5 other people in the car who agreed with him.
They were defending
him that, oh yeah, it's the bush. Their common sense told them that when you have rubber, it's better to throw it out into the bush than to leave it in the car. That was their common sense. It's because they were not privy to the knowledge I was privy to.
So if I understand what you're saying, knowledge determines what your common sense is.
Simple.
And so with that, then we come to this conclusion, somewhat a conclusion, that common sense actually is subjective.
It's subjective.
Common sense is not absolute.
It's not absolute.
For instance, in what you're saying means that we cannot all sit back one day. People from different places with different levels of exposure to information cannot just sit down and then look at this and say, okay, this thing is common sense. Because that thing you're calling common sense may not be common to another person.
Yes.
And so it means that common sense is not absolute. You see, I say this that, for instance, I give this example. For instance, you see Mo Salah walking down the street. He's not wearing a Liverpool jersey. But you can say, this guy plays for Liverpool. And if anyone comes to challenge you, you'll be able to prove. How do you prove? Oh, this is the guy's contract. He's supposed to play from this, that. If someone else has come to sign him, they'll have to terminate his contract, this, that. So this is the binding factor to the proof that to the fact that I'm trying to communicate that he plays for Liverpool. Common sense, because it's not absolute or doesn't have any absolution to be tagged to, it becomes fleeting.
Yes.
It now means that the information I have determines what is common sense to me.
Exactly.
And so when you actually use the term common sense, what you are saying is that that sense is common only amongst a group of people that have that common information.
Exactly. Man of God, watch this. You know, and when we come to the question, is common sense enough? I think that the response we give to this is peculiar and is accurate. Is common sense really enough? Long ago, during the Second World War, a group of people in Germany, a man was able to convince a whole community that the common sense was that let's kill the Jews, because the Jews were the ones taking all our resources, our food and everything. They're the reason why our lives and our livelihoods were not moving on. And the common sense was that kill them and then we'll have a better life. The people agreed with the authority. The people selected an authority to overthrow the authority that was already in place, just so that they can propagate this agenda, an agenda of exterminating an entire race, because that was the most reasonable and the most logical way to go.
You know, this reminds me of something. A statement that I've been brooding on for a long time. That when common sense is adopted as the constitution of a people, it is simply a prerequisite to anarchy.
Amazing.
Because all you are doing is that every man then has his own constitution.
When that happens, we are living in a very dangerous society. When everyone feels that what he thinks is common to him is the way to go. Can you imagine that? And we say this in light of the fact that if you want to govern your life only based on common sense, it becomes dangerous. We say that there is a God. You need to govern your life based on God's principle, not your common sense.
You see, at the end of the day, life must be lived with variables and constants. Without constants, everything else is a variable.
Yes.
So God is that constant.
God is that constant.
God is that constant.
Without him, your life, like everyone is subject to his own opinions. We can't judge our lives. We can't regulate our lives on our own thinkings. God has to be that defining point for us. That rule, that absolute person. When it's not in line with what God says, then we need to align ourselves to what he says. God is absolute. Our common sense is not absolute. And so we can't leave men to judge their lives based on common sense.
Is common sense enough?
It is not. It really is not.
So I think at the end of the day,
it really is not. I have this last point that I would want to make on this issue. We have got to the point where we have just concluded that common sense is not enough. You cannot base your life on common sense. We cannot just leave men to govern their lives on a subjective common sense. If everyone becomes their own God, it becomes a problem, because there's no God factor in the story. When we listen back to this gentleman that we are dealing with, he speaks concerning the issue of loving one another, because he goes ahead to say that yes, he believes there's a God, but the issue of what he thinks is the ultimate is love your neighbor as yourself. Maybe you don't know this. What is different about what this gentleman is saying and what Christians say is that Jesus Christ said that, first of all, love God, and then love your neighbor as yourself. You might think that, we can take away the first part, which is love God, and only love our neighbors, and that is enough. But it is not. It is that serious, because when you want to govern your life based on loving another man, it is always going to be hindered by the love for yourself. Self is always going to be that room that stands between you and the love you have for your neighbor. You cannot love another man more than you love yourself, as long as God is not in the question, or is not in the situation. If you take away God, there is nothing else binding you to why you must love another man more than yourself, or up to the standard of yourself. If that is created, this is the reason why when men had the will or men had the ability to put themselves first, they went about killing and this is the reason. The issue of self And the issue of thinking that we don't need this God in our lives, we can govern our own, we can regulate the love that goes between us. We can love ourselves more. If there's no God, no one's going to go about killing themselves. This is the reason. Because men put God out of the equation. That is why the 20th century and the 21st century has been responsible for more deaths than the first 19 combined. This is why. Because men want to put out the God factor. They want to say that the vertical love towards God is not as important as the horizontal one. But the Bible teaches that the vertical love breeds the horizontal one. If you can have love towards God, you can then love your neighbor. God inspires that love.
If you've not been loved, how do you love?
How do you love? And so the limitation of loving one another is the limitation of self. And so in order for us to love another man as much as we love ourselves, is for us to recognize that God is the absolute and he defines what we call love.
Wow. Wow. So I think all too soon we've come to the end of today's session.
I think it was powerful. I think
it was a very good
I think we responded to all that we had to respond to. And right now, if you have any questions, put them in the chat box. Put them anyhow you are watching this. Put the questions down and try to reach out to us. We would respond to questions as and when they come and as and when we get a chance to. Man of God, what would you like to say?
Well, with your permission, I think that in concluding, since we've been talking about God throughout, and we are men of God, I think that in conclusion, what we need to do is to give anyone out there who wants to give his life to Christ the opportunity to do so. Because I believe that there was a time in the Bible when the Bible says that a lady met Jesus at the well. And when she met Jesus at the well, the Bible says that Jesus had an interaction with her about how thirsty he was, and then a discussion. Now, this lady was not a Christian at the time. She was not saved, for lack of a better term. Now, this is what happened. She was seen more or less as an outcast because she had had 5 men in her life, and the 6th man she was with was not even her husband. That's what Jesus told her. She was very surprised. After having this encounter with Jesus, she went back to her town, surprised, and told the people in the town one thing. She said, "Come and see." She said, "Come and see this man who has told me everything about my life." That's all she had to say, and she said it. The Bible records that after some time of saying this to the people, all the people sought to hear who this woman had met. And within about a day or less, this woman eventually became an evangelist, winning her whole town. The Bible says the town followed her to Jesus. And when they got to Jesus, they asked him to stay further with them so he could speak with them. What I'm trying to say is that there are many of us that have not had this wonderful encounter with Jesus. But I think today is the day. One of the things we are saying might sound simple to some people. For some people, it has convinced them a lot. But I believe that the conviction of the Spirit has been communicated to everyone who is listening to us today, who needs to be convicted. And there are some people out there today who need to receive Jesus. I don't think it will be smart and wise on our behalf to end this session without giving you that call to Jesus. So if there's anyone out there who want to give your life to Christ today, I want you to place your hand on your chest right now, with all humility in your heart, and say this prayer with me. Say, "Lord God, I come before you today. I believe that Jesus came. I believe that he lived. I believe that he died. And I believe that you raised him from the dead for my sake. This evening, I declare that Jesus is the Lord of my life. I receive the life of God into my heart, into my spirit. I am a child of God. In the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus." If you said this prayer, wherever you are, you're born again. You are saved. Till we meet again, God bless you.
spite of all. Our faith is standing strong in spite of all. We will fight this fight. They think we're done. We've only just begun. The church is marching on in spite